How many years were you in the were you in the department?
I served for 20 years,
Wow,
then
awesome.
retired.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And if you would allow, Matt, I actually have an engaging story to tell folks. It's not
Please.
CSI, but it's comparable because I was there and I was in it. And there are 4 leadership lessons that I just want to highlight for you folks. So it's a
Yes,
patrol call that I
please.
was on.
Take it away.
If you're ready for story time.
Let's go to story time, Allison. Let's hear it.
Okay. So there's a lot of leeway in a patrol shift in an agency like mine, and you're responsible for your district and calls you get sent to. But in the in between times, you pretty much do what you want. So you could be lazy and just hide in a parking lot, or you could decide, you know what, I care a lot about preventing accidents. I'm going to do red light prevention at an intersection and give out warnings or tickets. You could decide I care a lot about shoplifting. I'm going to go walk through Marshall's or one of the bigger stores where we have a lot of. So there's a lot of discretion in patrol in terms of what you do with your time when you're not being sent on calls for service. So we had a lot of problems with shoplifting on the South Scene Highway in Weathersfield, and I got my paperwork out of the way. Way more typing and reports than you ever see on a crime show like CSI. I gotta say, a few things missing in real life police work compared to TV. The lighting is not always amazing. Neither is the weather. You're not guaranteed to have hot coworkers, and the smells of law enforcement are not captured by TV or movies. I gotta say, you really miss out on that. So anyway, I decided I'd gotten my paperwork out of the way for the shift, and I wanted to I care a lot about proactive policing. And shoplifting, it might sound like a minor crime. It actually it impacts and affects a lot of other crimes, which is why it's important to enforce against shoplifters. So I'll give you some examples. Shoplifters or petty crime, petty larcenies. Can result in they go grab some stuff out of, let's say, CVS, and they're running out with their and they may plow down a 78-year-old who just had a shoulder replacement and injure them, and they may not care, and they just go running. It impacts our car insurance rates in the state because people, when they're fleeing when they commit a crime and flee, including shoplifting, and or robberies, that rises the level of robbery when you go to steal something and then you physically touch or injure someone in the commission of that shoplifting. They'll take off and cream 3 or 4 cars on the way. So anyway, it's a day shift. It's, I don't remember the exact time, but earlier, like maybe 10, 11 in the morning. And I am in the plaza on the South Scene Highway that encompasses Marshall's and Walgreens. So I just start watching, and I see a gentleman make trips back and forth to his car in a way that was unusual. And he looks nervous, and he's definitely doing triple takes of me. And when he's coming in and out of Walgreens to his car, I can see he's got some things under a jacket, and then he's putting them in there in his vehicle and going back in. So after maybe the 3rd or 4th trip, I recognize this as, it's called boosting. So he's going in, stealing multiple items, loading up the car, and then he's going to run. So at some point, I did radio out and say, hey, I'm observing a suspicious male. We have numeric codes for all these things, obviously, which I'm not going to use because they're distinctive and private to each department. But you don't take the time to actually say those things. You use code. So let's make up a code, and I'll say my 20 is Silas at Walgreens, and I've got a 7230, which means a suspicious person with a potential crime in progress. So that's an indicator to anyone else on the road right now. If you're the adjacent district to me, you could head my way. Anyway, he gets in the car, and sure enough, he takes off, not at a high rate of speed, but I have observed enough at this point where I have probable cause to make a traffic stop. So I initiate a traffic stop on the Silas. And I've done at this point hundreds of them. He's immediately very nervous. He's in the car, he's gripping the wheel, then doing this with his hands, and you learn the signs, and you folks know your people. You work, that is your business, is people and properties, right? You know when someone's really what's normal and what's an outlier in terms of behavior. He's real nervous. I ask him to shut the car off. We're on the Silas. I ask him for his ID, and I got into the habit early on of whenever someone handed me identification, whether it was real or fake, I would look at the ID and look at the person, look at the ID, and then I would begin to talk to them with that name. So I'd look at the ID and say, "Hey, Matt, Matt, it looks like you were maybe just coming out of Walgreens. What were you doing back there?" So that I remember the name and the person I'm dealing with, and that's significant in this story. So we're going to call him, for the purposes of this story, I'm renaming him Oliver. It was a distinctive name, a memorable name. Oliver Stonington, we'll call him. So I said, "Hey, Oliver, what's going on today? I saw you were doing some shopping at Walgreens, and what'd you get?" And I can see in the back seat, it's loaded up with cases of electric toothbrushes, boxes of candies, boxes of higher priced items. So he's real nervous in a way that I'm not comfortable with. I ask him to step out of the vehicle, and an adjacent patrol officer comes and backs me up. Now, the first point I want to pause and make is what matters in excelling in your profession, which it sounds like just from the brief conversation in your team I heard, is working diligently. When you work diligently, it is recognized, not only by your coworkers, but by supervisors. And it matters that you work diligently. The second point here that I'm going to highlight for you before I explain what happened is how important teamwork is. And we can be aware of our coworkers, but to actually care about their well-being and how they're doing personally and professionally is huge. So my backup is a little bit passive but present, okay? And I start questioning Oliver, and I get him to the back of his vehicle, and he's getting what we use a lot of colorful language, but for professional purposes, I'm going to say he's getting real hinky. And so I say, I'm detaining you. So I put handcuffs on him. And I put handcuffs on him. I have him at the back of his car. And while he's detained, I call out on the radio, say he's detained. I start pulling out the boxes of, now this is evidence. So I'm putting some of it on the back of his vehicle. And I ask more questions. When I get enough information, I have dispatch, while I'm doing this, call Walgreens and say, "Did you observe a suspicious male, blah, blah, blah." They said, "Yep, he's wearing a bright green sweatshirt. He just left the store. He took, there's a whole shelf area that's missing. So this is your guy." Handcuffed, we go to escort him back to my backup's cruiser. And this is where things went rapidly south. We go to escort him back to the cruiser, and it's in police land. If someone is starting to escape custody, the only thing you don't want to do is say, "Hey, he's escaping custody." You don't want to announce that. That is like, it's the worst, because then you put them on notice that you know what they're doing. And unfortunately, my coworker, who was not amazing, shouted out, "He's trying to get out of the handcuffs." And as soon as they said that, he is able to whip one of his wrists through the handcuff, and now he's flailing around. And one handcuff, which is metal, swinging is not good. So he runs back to his car. My coworker freezes, just stands there, jumps in the driver's seat. I had him put the keys on the roof of the vehicle. Gets the keys and puts them back in the ignition. And, we have defensive tactics training. We have training about how to disarm someone, arm bars, how to use your PR-24 baton, how to properly use pepper spray, all of the things. But I can tell you, like, any training, when the shit hits the fan, is out the window. Anything that involves like fine motor skills or muscle memory, when you're in it, because what happened promptly was he tried getting, and I'm like, "Oh, hell no, you're not going to turn that ignition on." Now I'm in the vehicle with him. we're fighting. And he's punching me in the head. I'm punching him back. So stupid to punch people in the head. There's a big bone here protecting. It's the dumbest thing tactically, but again, the tactics are out the window and your adrenaline is firing. Now my coworker, my teammate, and I don't know if you guys can relate to this, where you just looked at one of your coworkers like, wow, I could really, whew. They are just standing on the other side of the vehicle, passenger side of the suspect vehicle, just watching like this. Not calling out for help for me, another backup that's willing to fight, not fighting with me or helping me in any manner, they just freeze and do nothing. And it was high drama. And by the way, this is while traffic's flying by, on South Highway is a busy highway. And I heard a fateful noise, which was the turning of the key of the ignition. And in that moment, you want to catch the bad guy and you want to make the arrest, but I did listen to my gut, which sometimes is hard to do. When you're in something, my gut was, you got to get out of this vehicle once I heard that ignition turn. And as soon as I heard it turn, I made the choice to listen to my gut feeling on this, to let it go. I don't know if it wasn't graceful. I either fell out of the car or threw myself backwards. And as soon as I did, gone. He just took off. And now you've got boxes of bubble gum, electric toothbrushes flying. Now it started raining, shit's everywhere. And I'm over tea kettle on the Silas, and it's a mess. And boy, is that a humbling experience, because within less than a minute, chief of police shows up. My lieutenant shows up. All kinds of backup now is showing up, because I was yelling on the radio, not my coworker. I'm yelling on the radio. He's taking off. I give a description of the vehicle, etc. So I'm so thankful I did trust my gut. I will say there were calls earlier on in patrol where I didn't, and I sustained a serious injury as a result. So that had happened before this. I'd learned my lesson to listen to my gut instinct on what to do. Chief and lieutenant get there. You guys have supervisors. You've been in the position of like being questioned by a supervisor, and they're like, why didn't you chase the car? And I was like, well, it all happened really fast, and this is high traffic and wet roads. They're like, okay. Well, they're like, well, you have his ID, right? I'm like, yeah, I do. I have it right here. It's right in my, and I was in the habit of putting a ID, if I was gonna make an arrest, in my pocket, looking around. And my chief's like, you have it, right? I'm like, yeah, I totally have it. And now my lieutenant, who likes me, is like, Alison, you have the ID, right? So we can ID him, right? I'm like, oh, totally. Now I'm like on my hands and knees on the South Highway in the rain with all this evidence everywhere. And that was another reason I couldn't pursue him, because you'd leave the evidence gone. The ID is gone. To this day, I don't know where the ID went. And I stopped thousands of cars. And if it came to a potential arrest, I would pocket the ID. And that's my last point, is just admitting errors, admitting when you screwed up. And I couldn't find it. I could feel that hot burning feeling on my face and my neck, like, yeah, I screwed this up. And I just looked at them and I said, I don't know where it is. I screwed it up. And in hindsight, the other mistake I made was I had handcuffed him over he was wearing a white puffy winter jacket, and you're supposed to handcuff on bearskin. And because you see this when you review the video of the body camera, my mistake, I improperly handcuffed one wrist over that, which enabled him to pull out of the handcuff. And so admitting my errors in that, it was not a good look. This was not amazing, right? But I did get some respect for saying, hey, this is what I screwed up. But let's go back to point one, excelling by working diligently. I said, I'm going to find him. I am going to find this guy. And at that point, they're like, okay. And everyone's like cleaning up the mess and helping us get sorted. I gathered the evidence together. secured it, brought it back to the PD, and then asked my boss, I said, can you put me offline? I'm driving right to the DMV. And he said, what are you doing that for? And I said, this guy's name is Oliver Stonington. It wasn't, but it was a very distinctive name. And I'm going to find him. So I went to the DMV. I had a hook there. They do have like an intel department at the Department of Motor Vehicles. They let me in and I said, please look up the name Oliver. And I want you to show me every Oliver in the state of Connecticut's driver's license or ID card between the ages, and I made the range wide. Let's say between the ages of 20 and 40. I want you to show me every single ID. And at first they laughed. They're like, okay, like, do you realize that's literally hundreds? And I said, I do, but I'm going to get this guy and I need to save some face. And what he did was wrong. And he, by the way, punched me several times and thought nothing of assaulting an officer in the commission of this crime. So sometimes luck comes into play, right? When you make a sale, when you make a connection, it's luck. And luck was on my side. This wasn't an ID that he had gotten, like, let's say 3 years ago and was due to renew. He had just gotten that ID in the previous 6 months. So he looked just like the photo, just like the guy that I saw. It only took about maybe 45 minutes to find the ID. And from that, I was able to put together an arrest warrant application to submit for the prosecutor's office and GA-15 in New Britain to review. And eventually, even though it was messy getting there, we did arrest Mr. Oliver. And I was able to make a really messy, potentially embarrassing situation good again. So I hope those are helpful for you folks, and I'm open to any questions of any kind about that story or anything, but the points that I made are working diligently does pay off. You do get recognized, and it does matter. You got to look out for your team members. I mean, I don't blame that person necessarily for not wanting to go hands-on, but man, could you have at least called in? Coincidentally, the next adjacent officer who's still on the job was an amateur pro boxer in Hartford in the 90s. That kid could fight. And he was like blocks away. So if they had just said, she's in it and she's not doing too good right now, can someone, I mean, he would have been right there. So looking out for your team members, even when it's inconvenient, even when you don't feel like it, even when, it matters. Listening to your gut instinct on people, whether you think you're maybe in an unsafe situation or you don't know kind of if you have a bad feeling or your gut's telling you to make a decision, I would trust it. And to admit errors, it really does. It sucks to do it, but you do gain the respect of your peers and your supervisors when you can just say, hey, I screwed this up, but I'm going to make it right.
It's a pretty amazing story, Alison, and it's not surprising that, you gleaned those four, just in the brief amount of time that you've sort of given us a little bit of your backstory and kind of how you operate and your own filter for sort of what's right and what's wrong and your passion for justice and accountability. It's not surprising that you would own up to, shit, I don't know where the friggin' license is. By the way, he must have grabbed it when you were fighting with him.
I don't know. Things went flying.
Yeah, I mean,
but I was so in the habit of if I thought this is not good, I would tuck it right in my patrol pocket here. I to this day don't know what happened.
But ultimately, I think like I hear what I hear. I get a different view on things, but like what I think is cool is just around that one story is that, okay, screwed up, whatever. 90% of the people around are like, oh, Allison, the guy got away. He stole some toothbrushes, but you were dedicated to the outcome being the right outcome.
Oh yeah.
To the DMV. Like to me, it sounds like most likely what happens if it's not you is that just gets dropped. That guy goes free and does it again.
Right. And it mattered to me particularly because when someone's willing to become violent to steal things, that could have been your mom that he injured.
Totally.
That could have been someone else's little brother,
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah,
really,
or the next step is he gets a weapon, right? And now he's
yeah,
carrying a gun too. Like, so yeah, for sure. Like,
yeah.
um, awesome story. We've got two questions. We've got Shane. What are you thinking, Shane?
Hi, Allison.
Hey,
Well, first off, you're very inspiring. In my previous life, I got a master's in criminal justice because I was supposed to be a cop, and I almost got hired by Monroe, and then I pulled out like at the very end and didn't decided I wasn't going to do it. But so I love hearing this, and I think you're so badass. And also, I feel like you were supposed to lose that license because otherwise, I mean, you're clearly still struggling with it. You're still thinking, "Where's the license?" So there's more of a reason not to have the license. I don't think this I think it was probably meant to disappear. I think it fell out in his car, but I guess my question to you is this. First off, I hope there was a coaching and counseling. I'm big on coaching counseling. Like I hope it was addressed the danger that your partner put you in. I really hope that was addressed, that he had
they
some counseling on that.
that was not the first time that that officer failed to act and they were terminated. I can't tell you the exact timeline, but within a year or two of that incident, that was one of the things that was documented, and they should not, probably not a bad person, but the job was not for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess my question is this is, just not to real estate agents, but I guess to anyone. I was also a social work. I did a lot of in-home services. I was, 28 years old in the, in literally the housing projects of Bridgeport, Success Avenue. Really never fearful. Like I think back, like, wow, I've been in a lot of situations. I worked in the court system where, leaving for my car, things like that. And always felt like I really just got lucky a lot. But what would you say, even in real estate, what's the bare minimum we need to have as skill, as tools, a weapon to, is there a training that we really should just invest in, even as a team? But how do we keep ourselves safe besides our gut knowing we got to go?
Yeah. It it's a longer conversation, and I do speaking engagements and workshops on this, but I'll say just now that we're here, it is a mistake to think that something like it's a mistake to rely on something like mace or pepper spray for self-protection, even though that's very commonly believed for a lot of reasons. So that is, can I just for I don't know how many, with the number of people on the call, how many people either have a form of mace or pepper spray or have a loved one that carries it or keeps it with them? Couple people? Okay. Um, so I would say if you're going to use or rely on something like mace or pepper spray, there's a lot of considerations for that to be used effectively. It can really be used against you. Often people buy it and don't train with it. They just throw it in a backpack or a purse and it collects dust or hair or lip gloss, and uh, they don't understand what it would actually take to use it or how to use it properly. And the biggest thing I would say about something like I'll just call it mace. There's several names that they're interchangeable, but they're the same thing. People can fight through that. So you could mace me in that situation, and I would still be fighting with him in the car. It just makes it a lot messier. So at the end of the day, I'm 5'2.5". I mean, I have a decent bench press, but in my best shape at 5'2.5", I'm not going to be able to physically, and honestly, it was my mind and my training that kept me most safe. So it's the decisions we make, it's the precautions we take. I think early on, some arrogance and naivety. I put myself in some situations that were higher risk, and I failed to see that risk and didn't wait for backup before I took steps to make arrests. And one of those occasions, I got my face bashed, and I mean, it's a gruesome photo, but I could have lost an eye. Thankfully, didn't, and had a great plastic surgeon. But uh, asking for help or taking precautions when you think something's a little off, I had an experience. I don't know how much you folks talk to other agencies, but just in the last year, a friend of mine who's also a realtor in Hartford County had a really unfortunate, disturbing experience in a house where a gentleman said he was interested in listing. And when she went to the house, he was in his bathrobe, seemed pretty normal, and he ended up exposing himself to her. And unfortunately, the police did not
Just
take.
for the record, bathrobe is not normal. Anyone ever goes to a listing appointment and someone's in the bathrobe, turn around, please leave
Yeah,
immediately.
yeah. Well,
Nothing about being in a bathrobe at a listing appointment would be
yeah, it was
considered.
morning, and he was like, "I'm so sorry." He wasn't otherwise acting weird.
Yeah.
And she's not an unintelligent person. She's quite smart. And the thing that was disturbing to find out about was her. So unfortunately, the local PD did not take her seriously. I assisted her with that and addressed that agency, which I can do credibility wise, and they do listen. But thankfully, her supervisor took it very seriously. And on one of these shared calls, shared the address and the gentleman's name with the local realtors. And I don't, not clear if it was just within that company or not. And several other women he had called and attempted to list his house with. And so that's disturbing. And it does make me think, man, if you folks have an experience, not just women realtors, anyone, because you guys can, it's not common, but can get robbed, can get set up in properties. If you have a bad experience like that, certainly it's important to, within your network, speak up about that, because when she did, that enabled them to see, oh my gosh, this guy actually has done this repeatedly. And unfortunately, he had his partner make complaints against her, if you can believe that. Try to get her jammed up at her job. And her boss had her back, thankfully. So frustrating. But I would be, if you're interested in a more formal talk or presentation about how to be safe in these situations, I'm happy to do that. It's just not something I could do really adequately in a really tiny amount of time, but I hope that bit was.
You're local. I mean, I think that's something that we would be totally open to hosting, even in our office, Aaron. Maybe something we can set up, for the realtor community. I'd
Yeah.
love to talk to you about that, Allison.
Okay.
Moses, you got a question.
Yeah, I was just checking. I understand that this particular story that you shared is you were watching and saw, multiple times the gentleman going in and out. Are there any situation where you actually prevent it? For instance, if there's a teenager who is doing something like that, eventually, if that teenager ends up being released or not reprimanded, he's going to do more, or she may end up doing more and more. Is there any way that your department or the place that kind of educates the kids not to do these kind of things?
Okay. That's a good question. To be clear, this was a gentleman in his mid 40s that was fighting with me and punching me in the head and the face. So definitely not a teen. But for teenagers, what Connecticut has done, it was a change made, I believe, in '05. So when I first came on the job, 16-year-olds were held criminally responsible as adults. So in 2002, if you committed a crime, let's say a robbery, at 16 years old, you were charged as an adult, as though you were 20, let's say. And those laws were changed so that in Connecticut, 16 and 17-year-olds are considered juveniles, youthful offenders. And so there are diversion programs. So, for example, in our town, yes, an example would be we had a case where some kids, it wasn't my case, it was a coworker. So the details are loosely, not precise, but they essentially lit a building on fire. It was vandalism, it escalated. They were playing around. I believe they were both foster kids and had a really, really rough upbringing. So they weren't trying to like injure people, but it was criminal mischief in the first degree, and it was vandalism, and it was technically arson. And they were diverted to our juvenile review board. So towns have things, it's called JRB, Juvenile Review Board, where we can make the decision along with the juvenile court to not arrest and ask the state to prosecute, but instead divert them to JRB, the Juvenile Review Board, for alternate methods of correcting behavior. So whether it's anger management or education or community service. The challenge with that, Moses, is there's no teeth behind that. So you can make all the recommendations you want on a JRB board, but there's no enforcement arm of that. So that's the challenge with that. Now, some kids take full advantage of it and do quite well. You know, they're really scared about, I could have gotten in huge trouble, and they have families that are involved and holding them accountable. And then they're thankful for the opportunity to, let's say, let's just do 15 hours of community service, write an apology letter, whatever the suggestions are. But for the kids that don't take it seriously and go on to commit crimes, there's no, or to fail to follow through with what was recommended for, you know, their punishment, there's no way to enforce that. Does that answer your question? And to be clear, Connecticut is quite generous with youthful offenders. So what I mean by that is, in Connecticut, when you get those arrests at 16 and 17, when you turn 18, you can use your youthful offender status at 16 or 17 to have those arrests. Let's say the parameters are, hey, you have 12 months of probation. If you don't get arrested again, you can use YO or youthful offender program to have that charge taken off your record. Then when you turn 18, let's say that kid turns 18, criminal adult in Connecticut, commits the same crime, then you can use AR. You can use what's called accelerated rehabilitation. So AR means, as an adult, any of us can be charged, and not for serious violent felonies, but some felonies. You can apply for AR, and if the judge approves it, you can operate within the parameters of what you were recommended to do. Don't face another arrest, go to anger management, do these things, and then that's wiped from your record. And I share that just to communicate that Connecticut is quite generous with people's mistakes and failures, but you got to be careful. Even when you think you've done due diligence with coworkers, people you hire to work in your house as contractors, people that maybe you have watched your kids, you could have someone working with you with no criminal record who actually has committed several crimes, and they have been those crimes are no longer recognized because they use their youthful offender program, and they may have used AR.